Hello and welcome to Sound Librarian. My name is Stefan Schutz. Today for our audio analysis, we're going to have a look at Dragon's Lair. And I hope I'm not being self-indulgent here. Dragon's Lair was significant to me when I was growing up. When I was at school, I probably put far too many coins into the arcade machines, trying to get through Dragon's Lair, completely failed. But it was significant because it was the first game of its type within the arcade area to use the Laserdisc, which means what we were seeing was fully animated a movie cut into sections with a very, very basic control interface to make decisions. But because it was a fully animated movie, it meant that it had a very, very high quality audio score to go with it. However, there were still technical issues with the limitations of the technology back then. So we're going to have a look at Dragon's Lair and we're going to see exactly what's good and perhaps what's not so good about it in the modern versions of it. Let's get started.
Uh-oh.
I probably paid far too much money into the Dragon's Lair games when I first saw them many, many years ago. Visually, these games were beyond compare. This was brand new technology. These were Laserdisc games. And when they came out at the time, even the name of the technology sounded impressive. Essentially, they were kind of like a DVD in a coin-operated arcade game, and the decisions you made effectively decided which chapter was going to play next. It was just the case that each chapter was very, very short. But the technology that allowed for the displaying of fully animated cartoons that you could interact with was astonishing. There were a series of other games within this particular genre that were very, very popular for a very short period of time. I suspect the production values on these games were really, really quite high because they have actually produced a full animated feature. Then they've simply cut it up into smaller chunks to allow it to be interactive in a game format. But what this means is that not only do you get fully animated graphics, but Dragon's Lair also has full voice acting and a fully orchestral score. This was absolutely unheard of at the time when it first came out, and this is why it created such a reaction. The game itself was mercilessly difficult, really, really hard. I never ever completed this game. In fact, even though I now have it on the iPad, I've still not managed to complete it. There are a series of moves, like some sort of complex dance move, that you have to be able to memorize and then trigger at exactly the right time. It is actually really quite a frustrating game to play, but it's also a real joy to look at the animation, listen to the sound design and the vocals, and of course the musical score. So what we have here is a game that in many ways was very much ahead of its time, and yet nowadays is something that we could quite easily produce, and yet we wouldn't. And so there's a bit of a weird contradiction there. One of the main things that the technology had an issue with back then, which I've noticed they haven't even rectified now, is that the different chapters, the different tiny jumps, were quite often very jarring. There was no ability for the various jumps to be seamless. You seldom could go directly from one transition to another with no gap at all. There was always a bit of a gap as the media was searching and loading the next little scene. So you would get these skips and sometimes a slight pause between them, but they never actually produced each small chunk to be tidy in itself. So there was never a neat little fade in and fade out, because obviously they were looking at it as though it was supposed to be watched continuously like one long linear feature. The problem was it wasn't one long linear feature, it had all the cuts involved. And so in some ways I think it might have been a better decision to actually have very short little fade-ins and fade-outs to make it feel more like you're jumping from one scene to the next, because that's all the technology was capable of. Now, on the iPad version that I have now, it does actually flow a lot better because it's obviously able to access the information a lot faster. But even so, I still find that some of the jumps, especially when you listen to the music, are a little bit abrupt.
Uh-oh.
There's no arguing, though, that this is just a really fun experience. The dialogue, the wonderful graphic style and animation really make this worth looking at. And from a historical research point of view, this game is outstanding. It's a very important game that needs to be looked at from the point of view of the development of the game industry. But from an audio point of view, this was a game that existed in arcades, that you put coins into and you could play in arcades. And it was a game that had fully recorded dialogue. So from that point of view, it's immensely significant and worth a little bit of the frustration to have a look at some of it. So among everything else, I think Dragon's Lair is actually just kind of a lot of fun. It really is, it's almost like a choose-your-own-adventure book. It's a choose-your-own animated movie type thing whilst you're actually playing it. But you can see that there are certainly some rough edges, especially from the audio point of view, that even with the modern version, I don't think they've really addressed those that well. However, it's still pretty spectacular having a fully animated game that you are playing and, of course, the accompanying music that goes with it. So I think it is relevant to look at from the point of view of where it began in the history of games and its where it fits now in the contemporary field. I hope this has been interesting for you and keep an eye out for more videos in the future. Thanks for watching.